you'll get the content that won't get replicated because it's authentic to you as a personal brand, and you won't have that experience where it takes 5 hours and you feel like you didn't get one of the takes right.
That's Aaron Witnish, A.K.A. the Video Content King. Aaron is the managing director of Content Only, a video marketing agency helping personal brands like you and I create 30 days worth of content in only 90 minutes per month. And that's what today's episode is all about. How busy entrepreneurs can go from feeling overwhelmed and being behind on their content calendars to being flush with ready to publish content their audience will love. On this episode, we'll learn how to find client-attracting topics your audience wants to hear you talk about.
In the space of 30 seconds, you can get your content ideas that your target market are typing into Google and know exactly what you can start talking about.
Tips and tricks on how to look and sound your best on camera.
Think about what you need to feel good and give yourself that little warm-up, a little bit of runway before you get started with the other person that you're talking to, and you'll probably find you relax into it, and 15 minutes into the conversation, you'll forget it's been recorded and you'll just be having a great chat.
And how being a guest on someone else's podcast can help you generate content and exposure for your personal brand.
Podcast guest appearances is steroids for your personal brand because you're getting exposed to an audience you didn't have to build.
So let's learn all about how to grow our personal brands through video together on this episode of Brand Science. Welcome to the Brand Science Podcast, all things personal branding and content creation, which is, speaking of content creation, I am joined today by Aaron Witnish, a co-founder of Content Only, which is a 3-step system to create 30 days of content in 90 minutes. Lovely, love all that. So Aaron, appreciate you coming to the show today, man.
Dave, very excited to be here and chat with you, mate.
Absolutely. So what I love to do at the beginning of every episode, being that this is a podcast for personal branders, a large part of personal branding is that personal part, is your backstory. So I want to start with, what is your backstory and what led you, what journey, hero's journey did you go on that inspired Content Only and this 30 days of content in 90 minutes process?
Interesting thing about the story is it all kind of happened by accident, as a lot of businesses do. So initially, if you rewind the clock back 14 years, I started selling information products online. So I'd write copy for sales pages, I'd run a Google ad, and I'd sell digital products, which back then that was quite easy to do. So a few people knew what I was doing. They said, hey, you know how to set up pages and advertising, can you help our business do that? So that's how an agency started. And then if we move along the timeline, we were sort of a end-to-end service in the agency front. And slowly but surely that started to niche into a specific platform, specific outcome. And we were doing a strategy that would help our clients open up business opportunities. But in order to achieve that, we would do content creation to help position them, to make them more palatable when they're approaching for these joint ventures. And so what was happening was our clients' networks were seeing their content and they were coming to those businesses and saying, hey, who's doing your posting? And they'd say, the agency was called TDMA, the digital marketing agency.com.au. So they'd reach out to us and say, we just want content. We only want content. And I really love content, and I've always created content since the inception of social media, since I've had accounts, something I've always loved to do. So it was a product that was always in the back of my mind, and Content Only started so we could have a service that just focused on content creation and didn't cross-pollinate or interfere with what we were doing with our more established agency. So it kind of happened by accident. We had, I think, 4 clients that were pre-sold and ready to go before we even launched the business. So we're able to build it with revenue from day one rather than self-funding the company. So it kind of happened by accident, but it's now where I spend 95% of my business time, and I just love creating content for business owners, personal brands, and people in that space.
Sure. That's great. It sounds like it kind of came out of necessity. It was something that you loved doing already, but then you found there was a high demand for it. So you were like, well, this is what a meeting of kind of two passions there. That's great. And so, you mentioned kind of this process for creating content. This is a huge problem with people who want to get into personal branding, is they don't know where to start because this Herculean task of creating content, tools, content ideation, how to show up on camera, what camera do I use, and how do I edit content and all that kind of stuff. It just feels like an elephant. And they say the best way to kind of eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So help us eat this elephant one bite at a time. Walk us through what's this process for creating 30 days of content in 90 minutes. Because this is another thing too, is what we hear all the time from our clients is, I have a full-time job. Like I'm a realtor. I'm always out there selling houses. I have an agency to run, right? So time is of the essence with business executives and such. So this 90 days is a pretty sexy number. Or I'm sorry, 90 days, 90 minutes is a pretty sexy number for those who want to create content. So help us understand kind of what that process is and where that 90 minutes is put towards.
If you're a professional, building your personal brand is one of the best things you can do while you're in a career, because if you can stand out in your industry and in your marketplace, the opportunities that come your way, and if you wanted to go out into business or monetize as a personal brand, you create that opportunity. So knowing what your specialization is a really good place to start. And don't feel bad if you're not sure, because you can just start creating content talking about the things that you want to talk about and let it take shape. But if you know who your audience is and what your specialization is, the first step is going, okay, who am I creating content for? And that's a really important question, because a lot of people try to entertain and create content to get likes, clicks, engagement. But in a business sense, that's not the right strategy. In an entertainment sense, if you're an entertainer, that's a great strategy. So it just depends where you're sitting. So then you go, okay, which platform is that audience on, or spending the most of their time and consuming their content on? So you can start to simplify it a little bit. Okay, I'm creating content for this group of people. They're on this platform. Let's say it's LinkedIn as an example. And what time of the day are they consuming this content? And you're like, oh, it's in the mornings on their commute to work, or in the evenings after the workday's done. And you can work out your content strategy very, very quickly with those simple questions: where I'm going to post it, what time I'm going to post it, who am I posting it for? The next part where everyone gets stuck is, well, what do I post now? And the first step in the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system is, we call it research. So there's research, research, record, repurpose. And the easiest thing to do is you take a keyword from your niche. So let's say you're a real estate agent or a realtor, and you might take a keyword like the property market, and you go to Google and you type that in, you press enter, and you scroll down. There's a people also ask section on Google, and it'll just have questions and queries that people are typing in, looking for that content, looking for that information. And if you keep clicking down, it'll just keep giving you question after question after question. So in the space of 30 seconds, you can get your content ideas that your target market are typing into Google, and know exactly what you can start talking about without overthinking, without getting overwhelmed, without running out of ideas. So that's step one. I think that solves a big problem for a lot of people.
And I want to emphasize this point too, because I think we get a little too in our heads with what we think needs to be our topic for our piece, that it needs to be this topic that's never been talked about before, and this original thought with this hot take, and that's the only thing that's going to get engagement, or be relevant for our client. But the thing is, with content creation, really, like the 101 content, the frequently asked question content, is typically the stuff we see is the most needed. And yes, there's time and place for like the hot takes, and if there's some news that's coming out and you want to kind of add your perspective to it, but don't overthink it. It sounds like it's kind of the first step is just like, go to where people are already asking these questions and seeing what the most asked questions are, and just start there, especially because starting content creation is difficult. So like, the lowering the barrier to entry with just figuring out what to talk about is probably the most ideal thing for personal brands. But you're saying like, just go to Google and see what people are already searching.
Well, if you're solving the questions that people are typing in, they're relevant, and that's what people want to know. And if you become the solutions to people's biggest problems, they see you as the biggest expert in the space. So as a personal brand, if you're meeting the market and your audience with the questions that are going on in their head, and you're answering them, then all of a sudden they're like, you've got to go listen to Dave, because he has all the answers that I need to know about getting my home loan or where to buy property, the property market, what's happening depending on what the specialization is. So you're absolutely right. Just see what people are asking and then go answer those questions.
Yeah, and that's kind of the trick too, right? Is when you show up answering the questions that most people have, it gives this concept of like, wow, he really knows, he's really inside my head. You know, he knows what I'm thinking, he knows my problems. And you know, that when people think, oh wow, this person knows my problems inside and out, they're going to assume he knows the solution or they know the solution too. So you know, if you're too everywhere with your strategy and you're kind of talking, you know, and whatever the latest trend is or whatever, you know, you're sometimes not speaking your audience's language. That's really great. So first one is research. One area you mentioned, okay, is Google, going to Google and finding what the most asked questions are. Is there any other places that people can go to find kind of their topic muse, if you will?
Yeah, there's vidIQ. So if you're creating video content and you want to see what the demand and competition is like in different niches, you can do the exact same process that I just mentioned that you did on Google. So you take any keyword that someone might type in that niche or searching for that information, you put it in there, and there's a questions tab that comes up. And if you click on that, it'll tell you how many people are typing that in to YouTube every single month, and then also how much competing content's out there. So every now and again, you'll see something that's green, and that'll be a low competition search. So if you create a video that has the title that people are searching for, and you answer that question and you use the title at the start of the video, you're optimizing for YouTube, which is a search engine, and you're also putting content out that doesn't have a lot of competition at the moment, which can help you get that 24/7 real estate when people keep looking for that online, which can give you
Mm.
a 24/7 asset that keeps getting attention and viewership and driving people towards your personal brand.
Sure. Yeah, I love the concept of like this 24/7 asset, because what we like to say is, you know, content is like your little mini sales soldiers out there that are always selling for you no matter, yeah, like you said, 24/7, you know. For example, you're in Australia, I'm in Philadelphia, very different time zones. So we have to sleep sometime, but our content doesn't sleep. That's always
Right.
selling for us. So, you know, no matter when, what time of day, you know, you always have a piece of you out there kind of pitching and selling your service. I love that. So first step is research. Now you said second step is to actually record.
Yeah. So the easiest way to do this, content creation's hard. If you set up a camera and you go, I've got to film videos, and you're staring down the camera, you get awkward, you get unnatural, and it's usually take after take after take, and you still don't feel like you've got it. So what you do is from those questions that you get from your research step, you compile a list of say 12 each month, and then you get a colleague, you get a client, you get a friend, someone that you have great rapport with, and all you're going to do is jump on a platform like Google Meet or Zoom, and they're just going to chat to you. So they got the questions. You're going to show up on your iPhone, so you can record it the best format for short form, so you get it in the right dimensions. And they're going to ask you the question. You'll repeat the question to them, and you'll just talk to them and answer the question. And if you go through and do that, you'll find it's such a natural delivery style. You won't be in your head because you'll just feel like you're talking to a colleague or a friend. You'll forget that you're recording after question two or three. So you get the most authentic style. And because it doesn't matter if you mess up or you need to do a double take or you want to add more, because that gets sorted out in step number 3, repurposing, you'll get the content that won't get replicated because it's authentic to you as a personal brand, and you won't have that experience where it takes 5 hours and you feel like you didn't get one of the takes right. So
Been
that's
there.
been, yeah, that's been a transformation. And that came about with a conversation I was having with one of my clients who was a bricklayer, and he said he wanted to do some videos. And we were on Zoom at the time. I said, well, I'm just going to start asking you questions, mate. Let's just talk. And we hit record, asked him questions. He answered them. we finished the conversation. I gave it to my editing team, and then they gave me back 12 clips that we could use on social media from a spontaneous 20-minute conversation. And I was like, that's exactly how content needs to be created to keep it original, authentic, and on brand for
Right.
people.
Right. Yeah, it's the kind of motto we go with is, everything is content. And so in this case, it's a little bit more like, hey, we're going to set up a time and place and list of questions that we're going to ask you. So it's a little bit more prepared, but in your case, it sounds like even it can sometimes be impromptu. Like if you are just having a business meeting, everything's remote nowadays. So we're always, at our desk, at our house, Zooming. And so you just got to press or Google Meet. So in those cases, if you guys are, if you're with a business partner or your team, and it sounds like if you're just kind of in a zone where you're like, wow, this is actually a really good conversation, just press record. And that can end up being some impromptu content as well, right? So I guess it could be, one could be, let's set up time and place, because that way you're getting it for the week or for the month. But as long as you're just recording or you're just in some sort of Zoom or Google Meet, it sounds like you could still probably get some good content that way too.
Definitely spontaneous works really well because then it really is off the cusp and most natural.
Right.
The difference is with step one is you're answering questions, the marketplace and your niche is searching for. So you're creating that relevant content that is solving their problems. Option number two is great if you really want to just have fun. If you've got someone that you have a really good energy and you have great chats about your market, then you can do that and not even have to go to the research step and just start with a fun, easy, relaxed conversation and show up and record it. Very simple.
Yeah. And so I want to spend some time on this step too, because actually pressing record is a pretty nerve-wracking thing for people who've never been on camera before. And I know you mentioned having these types of conversations where it is a conversation versus you alone in your apartment and like going up, pressing record, walking back, and like doing a talking head video is kind of a different vibe. How can people kind of prepare either mentally or with equipment or scenery to help them show up their best on video, where it is authentic, where they're not overthinking it, and they can present their best version of themselves, and also the best iteration of a response? Should they be prepping for their responses? Should it be off the cuff? Is that most naturally? Kind of what are best practices for just showing up on camera?
Well, first of all, is being in a space where you feel good about being on camera. So you're wearing what you'd wear for work and you feel good in those clothes. Using your iPhone, you're going to get pretty good, or a smartphone, you're going to get pretty good quality video. So you should look pretty sharp on that. Using a backdrop or a space that you like being in that environment, that's all going to help you feel good about the end product and what's going to come out in the recording. We have clients that show up to the sessions and they don't prepare for we have the questions they'll show. We have others that are meticulous that prepare a lot. And so I think it's how you feel confident. So if you're someone that's a natural communicator, you're probably going to be fine just showing up and jumping into the questions and talking. If you're someone that likes to prepare, I would say do that. So stick to your strengths, because if you need that for the confidence, you need to review, have a couple of dot points that you've taken in advance, and that's just going to help you deliver the way that serves you best. I would say also have a warm up, like have 10 minutes of chatting before you dive into the content, because that relaxes you into the process and you'll already have the energy because there's another person on the other side of the conversation. You've leaned into that. You'll feel good. It'll already be flowing, and just give yourself that freedom and flexibility for it to not go well and to feel unnatural, to feel awkward, permission to stuff up. Because in step three, you'll see it doesn't actually matter if you do mess up, if you lose track, if you you say all the time, because that's where it gets ironed out. So I think just think about what you need to feel good and give yourself that little warm up, a little bit of runway before you get started with the other person that you're talking to. And you'll probably find you relax into it. And 15 minutes into the conversation, you'll forget it's been recorded and you'll just be having a great chat.
Yeah. I mean, in full transparency, I get the pre-stage jitters every time I do a podcast, right? Like, and it's funny because I'm just the host. I mean, I won't say just the host, but like, the eyes are typically on the guests to kind of show up, but I still feel this pressure to do it. And so, before this podcast, we had a few minutes of kind of a warm up, and I do that for the guests, but I largely do it for myself so that I can get the warm up myself and feel comfortable being able to talk into a camera and show up. So totally get that. One thing I know is somewhat of a kind of a debate, if maybe that's the wrong word to use, but a discussion, is the idea of scripting versus kind of off the cuff and the pros and cons of each. Do you have clients that prefer to, well, I know this is more of a conversation, but is there ever kind of a point where they're like, you know what, I really need this to be scripted out word for word and I'll just read that? And what do you see as kind of maybe the pros and cons of being overly prepared versus kind of letting things just fly off the hip?
Scripted, you're in your head. So you'll see that in the footage. You can tell when someone's reading a script. Very easy to see. So it's less authentic. So if it's avoidable, then I would say drop the script. You've got the answers. You know your craft. You're a personal brand. You're an expert. Trust that it'll come out when you're having the conversation. If it's something where you have to deliver word for whatever reasons, maybe that it's a sensitive area and you've got to say the right words, use the right language, or you're doing a call to action, it might be a video where you're asking people to do something very specific, then by all means, that might be appropriate at that point. We might have in the 12 questions that we ask the client, they might have one where they've actually prepared some variation of a script where they have to say something quite specific in that response. But generally speaking, you're going to get a very different style of content and authenticity when someone's scripted versus unscripted. And I think you'll find that not unscripted is going to connect more with the audience and bring out the best version of yourself. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, it's something I've battled with early on in content creation, and largely why I wanted to start this podcast is because there is no script here, right? There's like, we're not actors here, so we have to be able to shoot off the hip. But yeah, I agree with the idea that there's like little quirks to you that don't shine through when you're too in your head, as you're saying, trying to read. You're not able to express yourself naturally, and people can clearly see that. So maybe what you're saying is like on point, but just the way you're saying it, I just don't feel like I can vibe with that. And that's the personal part, as we're talking about with personal branding, is anyone can read a script, but I want to know, like, specifically you, why do I want to work with you? So yeah, 100%. And so we talk about kind of being comfortable on camera with kind of the clothing you're wearing, who you're talking to, the environment, maybe what you're saying. Um, what other elements to video creation specifically help support the end result of the content? Is there equipment? Thinking about things like lighting and audio and all that kind of stuff. What are best practices for ensuring, if you're going to capture video content, that it's going to come out in a way that is going to be prime for where you're trying to publish it, most likely social media?
If you're a personal brand, also think about that audience and what you want your brand to look like. Because we have some clients that are in, say, trade and construction. So aesthetics is less important than a client that might be in a very specialist consultative type brand. And if you're in a space where you want to be perceived as high end and that's your audience, then aesthetics might be more important. So you might want to deliver at a higher quality, which means you do get some lighting, which you can get lighting rings on Amazon. You can get a Bluetooth wireless mic for about $50 next day delivery, and that can give you really nice high quality sound. But don't overcomplicate it, because I think where most people stumble is they don't get started with content because they put all these variables in the way. They go, I need the microphone, I need the camera, I need the lighting, and they never get started. The best thing you can do is have the journey of your content starting somewhere and getting better as you go, because you can always add those things in, because content is about adding value to the end user and the audience. So if you can just start by saying helpful things that solve problems, and you focus on what's in it for them and not about yourself, and how can I deliver value for, even if it's just one person that hears this message, and forget about the metrics, that's the mindset that will get you to show up, because it's more about the habit in the beginning. So I would say if aesthetics are important, get those basic pieces of equipment, make sure that you feel good about that. But more importantly, it's about building the muscle. And we have clients that really don't care about the quality. They just want to say great things. So as long as the actual content, what comes out of their mouth is brilliant, how it looks is less important. Then we've got the other end of the scale where they've got high-end cameras, they've got everything to a T, and that's fine, because again, they're creating the content for their end user that represents their brand. I think that's your choice, and that's what you get to choose. But get started first and foremost. Don't complicate it, because you'll get better and you can layer things in as you go.
Yeah, the that's kind of core tenet number one, I would say, is the first phase when you're starting your personal brand is just understand what you want to say and make sure you consistently show up and say it. The how you say it, we'll craft that over time, and we'll polish that over time. That's the makeup that you put on and everything. It's the video editing and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I agree. The day one focus is just actually press record, and then more importantly, press publish after that. But yeah, being able to show up consistently and speak on a topic in the right messaging is like 75% of personal branding, and all the other kind of stuff is the icing on the cake. And I think we flip it. We think, oh wait, I need the icing before I can start creating content. But I think that's more of like our excuse, because we're too nervous to get started. Um, so it sounds like kind of a lot of the content that is you would be able to create with this system is a lot of like talking head videos with kind of thought leadership ideas, FAQs, misconceptions, things like that. And you're able to create 30 days worth of that content to publish. Is there on the back half of that, when you actually when you're publishing this content, obviously the goal is, we're not looking at kind of fluff metrics like views and likes and all that kind of stuff, right? We're looking more so, am I impacting my audience in a positive way? And ideally, at the end of the day, that translates into some sort of ROI for me, because that's kind of why I'm here too, is I do have a business to run and I'm trying to attract clients. So if I see clients go up, that's one indicator that I'm being successful. Is there a certain type of content that you feel translates the most into that type of result? For example, you can be publishing content for the sake of attracting eyeballs, but then at the same time, you need to convert those eyeballs into clients. So how do you think about that in terms of like, okay, it's not just showing up and talking about FAQs, you still need to turn eyeballs into clients, and that still takes a different style of content. So is that an arena that you play in as well?
Depth is the most important aspect if you've got a business component to what you're trying to achieve. So the more narrow you go, the more specialist you are, the easier it becomes to monetize, because you're solving more specific problems, and people will usually pay more money for bigger problems to be solved. So some ways, the narrower you go, the less you get the vanity metrics, because there's a smaller pool, a smaller audience, but the more money you make because you're specializing. And I think that's really key to understand. And one pivot that we've noticed has a massive impact on the business side when you're creating content is something we call the one URL rule. And this is where you can send all your traffic from your content to one place. And you could just say, go check out the link in my bio as an example. So in our business, we have the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system, which we give away for free at contentonly.au. So by having that in our bio on all our social media profiles, when we come on podcasts like this and we say that, if we want to put it as a call to action in the content, we can just keep sending traffic to the one place. Now, we've become known very quickly for the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system. So if you as a personal brand go, okay, what's my system, or what's the outcome that I can deliver? And you can put that into a sentence like the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system. What's your version of that? Very quickly in your industry, in your space, people will start to go, oh, that's Dave who does this. And that helps people come to you for a very specific outcome. And that's where it becomes really easy to get clients, and also them knowing what you do for them. And conversion goes through the roof, getting people that are coming to you that know exactly what you can do for them makes life so much easier in a marketing sense. You're not filtering through all these leads that don't really quite know how you can help them. So you spend a lot of time with people that are unsure and they're not 100% certain you're the right fit. People are like, okay, this is exactly what you do. So if you can come up with your version of that, and you can have a place where you can send any organic traffic in your bio, in your content from your profiles, you'll find that just showing up and doing content consistently will actually drive a lot of business opportunities your way. And I think that's been a really important shift for people that are going down the road of producing content.
Do you think, is it best to kind of pepper in some calls to actions within your videos itself, or should you keep it more so thought leadership, value driven, and then if they're interested, they'll swipe off into your profile, stumble upon your link, and go, "Oh, okay, there's some free lead magnet. Let me opt into that." Which is there a preference there?
If you look at the content that you're creating, I would say if you've spoken about a specific problem and then that resource can help solve that problem, you can mention it then. But I think if it's not quite a fit, then you just add the value, because people, if they're sitting there, they're retained and they've watched you for 40 seconds, they might go look at your profile. And then if it's sitting there, they go, oh, look at that resource. So I'm not a big advocate of CTA call to action, send people to the leads magnets and all that sort of thing, but strategically using it where it's a fit or appropriate. Let's say you've talked about it and saying in the text PS, we've got it, go to the bio or whatever and download it, or having it in the comment section below. That can be a really simple way to get some hands up and to drive some opportunities for your business. But if you look at my content, for example, I very rarely tell people to go to the website. It might be 1 in 10 pieces of content that I do that. So it's probably an 80-20 is probably how I look at it with our clients as well. We might have 20% of posts that direct them to do something, 80% are just value, delivering information that's going to educate the end audience, make their life better, and build that relationship, build the expertise, build the positioning. And then I'm sure when that person gets curious or the time's right, that's when they'll start exploring and go have a look and find a way to potentially get further help from there.
Mm-hmm. One common concern, we'll call it, that we always hear about people who will say either want to start their personal brands or have started creating content and publishing content is they are weary of publishing too much value content, informational content, because they don't want to feel like they're forcing FAQs down people's throats and they're just constantly showing up, especially if they're starting to publish this content on their personal Instagram or their personal Facebook, where they typically would show, them at a coffee shop or them with family. And now all of a sudden they started their personal brand and they're starting to shove like 101 content down your throat. And so they want to avoid showing up with that type of content because they don't want to be seen, I guess, as, a try hard or a know-it-all or something, right? So do you feel that there's maybe a balance? What would you say to those people, first of all? And two, is maybe there a balance of value content and maybe story-driven content and maybe personal content that kind of evens out everything in the end, where you don't feel as though it's just constantly a dictionary spitting facts at you?
For me, I grappled with this personally because when I decided where I wanted to go as a personal brand, I was like, oh, I've got all my friends and family and they're not going to be interested in content and me talking about content all the time. So I sat there. But when I actually got aligned and leant into that and go, well, what's my vision and what do I want to achieve personally and how does that tie into the business, I just let go of that and just say, I just want to create the content I want to create. And they don't have to watch it. They don't have to follow. They can unfollow me. I wouldn't be offended because I understand it's not relevant to them. They're not interested in it. But for
Right.
me, that was a big moment because I went all in and I stopped filtering and I stopped worrying about it. But I think it's also important to put in some of your values. What are some of the things that you enjoy? What are some personal stories? Are you a parent? Are you married? What do you like to do? Because that's the human side. So if you're delivering education and helping people in your area of specialization, but they also see, hey, that you go to the football on the weekend and you're a dad, that's more connection. They go, oh, they're like me. I'm a dad. I've got kids. I go to the football. And that more humanization actually accelerates the relationship with your audience and you're more approachable, which can actually help on the business side. So for me, I'm like, put in the stuff that matches your values on the personal side, wherever it seems appropriate, share it. But if you put too many constraints and you try to, I guess, push down what you actually want to do, I found that created a lot of inner conflict. And when I let go and stopped judging myself and stopped judging what I wanted to do and just went all in, it was just freedom and not worrying about what other people think. Because, like I said, every piece of content I do, I just want one or two people that really needed to hear that message or get that value. I made it for them, not for my mum, not for my dad, not for anyone in my family. And I found that they're extremely supportive anyway. They like stuff. They probably don't watch it, but usually a thumbs up or something like that comes through. So I think just let
Yeah.
go, do what you want to do, and forget about other people and just give the value.
Yeah. And I found that it's scary to begin a personal brand and to start showing up with content and presenting this different version of you online. But I think we overthink the idea of what other people are thinking about us. Because, yeah, 9 times out of 10, it's usually people who are like, giving us the, hey, way to go, like, way to show up. I could never do that. Like, good on you for, putting yourself out there. So, as long as you're doing it in a genuine, like, authentic way, there's really no reason anyone should have an issue with it. In fact, most of my experience through my personal brand journey has been like I'm motivating other people to be like, maybe I should do that too. So yeah, by you not showing up, almost you're doing your audience and family and friends like a disservice, because you actually do end up becoming more of like a motivational muse than the opposite of what you think, in terms of like people are kind of snickering behind closed doors.
The people that do get triggered are the ones that are going, I know I can't do that, but I really would want to do that. They're the ones that are generally the ones that are going to get upset by it. You will inspire people, and some of the people you inspire, you'll never know. It's interesting because I'll hear from a friend's friend or something like that. Oh, I've been following you for 2 years and I had no idea because they've never engaged with anything. And you, yeah, helped me decide to go talk about my podiatry on Instagram or something like
Oh,
that. So you never know. You have this ripple impact. And the people that you lift up by doing the activity and being consistent and focusing on service is really profound and probably underestimated by people when they step up. But also, I look at it from a standpoint for my son, and I understand that, like, I'm from a legacy legacy standpoint. I'm not going to have like this insane legacy, but for him, he can see my journey, and I go, isn't it cool that I'm actually documenting what I'm doing, everything that's going on as I go? Because if he wants to look back at what was dad doing when he was 38 or whatever it is, he can go see that, see what I was talking about, and see parts of that journey. So I think I'd love to go back and see what I lost my grandma yesterday. She passed away at age 88, but wouldn't it have been cool to go back and see what she was talking about, what she was doing at my age, and what she was focusing on? So I think, if anything, one, I get to feel good about showing up and not holding back with what I have to share. But number two, my son can go and he can look at that, and maybe future grandchildren and people in that lane can go, oh, that was great, granddad as or whatever.
right.
He did. So I think that's kind of cool to be able to have a little trail there for the future if they're curious, and they might not be curious.
Sure. And one of the kind of side benefits is when you first start, you're not going to be great. Some people are going to be just natural storytellers, natural on camera, and just crush it. for the majority of people, most of us, me included, you're not going to be able to just press record and, be 100. So there's going to be a learning process, what I call kind of the puberty phase, where there's going to be the awkward figuring things out phase. But you still need to show up, you still need to press record, you still need to press publish. And you need to go through that. You need to learn. And after a few months, even, you can look back at the post you did, 3 months earlier and see how far you've come. Just being a bit more smoother and fluid in thought, looking more comfortable on camera. And so I think people are worried, oh, I'm going to look so terrible, and awkward. And like at first, probably, but we all do. And, give it another 3 months, give it 6, give it a year, a year from now, give it 5 years from now. I love seeing these like, influencers who have hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, and they'll go and they'll like review their first post or something. And it's just so night and day of how they are now, because everyone starts somewhere. So yeah, you have to go through that awkward phase. But it's like, to your point of like being documenting and being able to reflect and look back, whether it be for others or for yourself, to see how far you've come. It's fun to kind of see the improvements there. So we've talked about the research, recording, and now there's a third step that we still need to get to. So let's walk through that.
Yeah, so you've got your content ideas that you got in step one that are for your target audience in your niche. You've had your conversation, which is where this 90 minutes comes in, talking to your colleague, your friend, and recording that. Step three is the repurposing. So this is where you convert that conversation into all your different content formats for the next 30 days ahead. So depending on where you're at, if you're bootstrapping, you're new to a personal brand, there are tools like Opus Clip that will take that conversation and churn it into videos for you with AI in about 10 to 15 minutes. And you just have to go through and edit the captions. The challenge is it won't necessarily cut the content that you want. It just intuitively cuts it and gives it to you. But it can be a really good place to start if you don't have access to editors and you don't have capital to invest in this. And you can take the transcription of your video, you can take the video, to rev.com, and you can get a transcription of that. And so then you've got the text, and then you can use tools to get that rewritten into your written content. But if you're at a stage where you'd like to do it at a production level that's on brand and you know what you want to achieve with the content, you'd take that video recording, you'd go to a freelancing platform like upwork.com, and you just give them the instructions. Hey, these are the 12 questions that we've answered in this conversation. Can you cut a clip for each one of these questions and put my branding, my text, and captions on the videos? Because I think it's 92% of videos get played without sound. So if you don't have the captions on there, people don't know what you're talking about, so you don't get the attention. And they can do that for you, and then they send you back your 12 or however many videos they cut. That's ready to go for the month ahead. And you can also do the same thing with that transcription. Get someone who's a content writer on a platform like Upwork and say, hey, these are the 12 questions that I answered. Can you take what I've said here and can you convert it into a social media post with hashtags that's for my target audience? This is my target audience. So that way, all you've had to do is have the conversation. You're either using some tools like Opus Clip or you're using someone that's an editor offshore that you can get done relatively cheaply to do the lifting for you, to cut all the content, and you got your 30 days ready to go.
Sure. So there's a couple of things here I want to dive into. One is, you mentioned a few times the concept of on-brand video editing. And the editing process, you mentioned captions being a very large part of that. But in mostly like on Instagram, we see this a lot, the kind of degree of editing that goes on with these reels that are created. You see everything from just bare bones, just captions, maybe even using the captions, the default captions that come with Instagram, all the way to these like highly produced videos that require a professional editor and custom graphics and animations and sound effects and all that kind of stuff. I want to know kind of your take on is the highly edited stuff necessary at some point? Do you find that those work better than others? What's kind of your take on how much editing is required in one of these types of clips, given obviously resources and time and budgets and such?
Interestingly, my less produced videos outperform my heavily produced videos. And
Mm.
maybe there's just more realness in the less produced videos. And there's something in that, I think. But again, it's situational. It's like, where are you at? What's your brand? Who's your target audience? And it's, again, getting started is step number one. I'd say if you can just start with some basic, if you're not sure what your branding looks like and you haven't got to that phase, just start with some nice white captures. And it could just be the Instagram captions themselves to get going. You can just have someone cut the clips up for you and then add them in, and that can be a really simple place to start. So I think it's about removing the barriers to entry and having the path of least resistance so you get in the game. And then as your business grows, as your resources grow, as your income grows, you go, okay, now I can reinvest or repurpose this into the next level that I might want, which might be a little bit of B-roll or a little bit of production. So I personally, I don't. If you look at my more recent reels that I post myself, it's just captions. I went through the stage where I did the B roll, I did all the emojis. I just like nice, clean captions at this point, and a lot of my clients do too. We have some that do like extra production put into it. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes less is more, but modeling is also smart. So if you go, who's leading in my niche, in my space, who's getting the engagement, who's got the audience, who's getting the followers, and go, how are they producing their content? What's unique about that? Why is it working for them? And borrowing some of the ingredients that go into that can be smart because it's kind of like a shortcut for success. So I wouldn't try and reinvent the wheel. Just go, who's doing really, really well? What are a couple of the points that are similar between them and the other two or three people that are the leaders in this space, and what can I borrow based on where I'm at? Maybe I can't do the full scale production, but maybe I can leverage a couple of basic things that they're doing and start there rather than trying to connect all the dots, because modeling is probably the easiest way to get the answers as to what's going to work well in your space.
Yeah, and when we say modeling too, in this case, a large problem with people who do start their personal brands is they come in and they try to not just model but replicate, verbatim, if you will, who's being successful. And I think what we're discussing here is more so pinpointing who's successful in your space and analyzing what has made them successful, and then determining how you can translate that into what's unique for yourself and authentic for yourself, and representing that. So if they're not, if they don't have highly polished and edited videos, it's probably because the audience within your industry prefers less edited videos. So lean that way, but you don't necessarily have to edit your videos exactly like they do. Essentially, that's mostly what you're saying, correct?
Well, the people that get paid the most is Elvis Presley, not the Elvis Presley impersonators. So for me, I'm like, you've got your own unique craft and gift, and and you want to get to the point where people are imitating you, right? That's the flattery. So be you, and that's what separates you in the marketplace. But you're absolutely right; it's borrowing maybe some of the qualities that they've used in their, say, production side, that's worked well for them, or even just when they're posting the content, how often they're posting, just to get some clues as to how they're going about it strategically. But the minute you start being someone else, you know on the inside that it's incongruent, and that shows up. And I think for the average person, that can cause some pain when they go down that route. And I understand too, because you get excited, you hear something from someone that's famous, or they're an influencer, they have a great idea, and you like want to share it with other people because it's really cool information. And that's okay too if you do that. But credit source, say, hey, I heard this, it was so good, I got it from Dave. So if I share something, and sometimes I do because I think it's really valuable information, I'll always try and credit the person that I got that idea from where I can. I'm probably not perfect all the time, but if you can be you, you're going to feel like, so for example, someone might comment on your post and say something that's not very nice, which will happen if you're doing a lot of content. But if you're being you, it doesn't affect you. But if you're being someone else and you are imitating, that's when it hurts, because there's probably some truth in that. So do you, and you'll get the best results long term for your brand, because it will be your brand, not someone else's brand that you're replicating.
On that point, this is the other topic I wanted to talk about, with the idea of it being authentic and original to you. Is you even mentioned it, kind of incorporating some AI elements into the content creation process. And now the idea of AI and content creation is obviously a very hot topic right now. Where do you see AI playing a role in content creation? Where should it play a role? And what are some of the mistakes that people could make with where they're currently trying to use AI, and it kind of leading to maybe a misrepresentation of who they are, or content that just isn't quality.
Start with original human input. I think that's the key to being a personal brand. And if people are going straight to the AI tools and they're spitting out something, all they're getting is a duplicate that's been pulled from the web that's predicted the next thing to say. So it's not their content essentially. So if you've got original footage, which is why we love the model that I shared about with the record, that's you talking. That's not existing somewhere else on the web. So you're starting with original human input. Then you could use an AI tool like Opus Clip to accelerate the production side and get those clips, which is still you. So it's authentic, it's original. You're just using it, leveraging it to get an output. And then with the text, you've got the transcription. It is AI that's transcripting, but it's your words. They've come out of your mouth. So when you use this model, it's all authentic and original, but you're just using AI tools for efficiency and to get things out faster than you would if you're trying to do it all manually. So it's finding that balance. And again, it depends on where you're at in the journey. You might need to lean into that a lot more starting out, because you just don't have the money to invest in an editor, and you can get in the game with AI. So you embrace it and you use it. I always look at it as the driver of the AI is what's going to get the quality of the output. So a poor driver is going to get a lazy, very low quality, and that won't perform as content, because people are going to read it or see it or watch it and go next. And so the algorithm will punish that because there's no engagement, there's no retention. So again, it has to be great content. It has to be quality where people get value. It stops them in their tracks. They click on it, they consume it. That's when the algorithm shows it to more people. So again, it comes down to quality content and quality output. So if you're using AI, the end product has to be really good, or else it just simply won't perform.
100%. And one area I know was kind of part of your process as well, which I think is very apropos for us to talk about today, is another form of being able to create recorded content, which is podcasting, or showing up on other people's podcasts as a guest. And so largely part of why I started this podcast was for exactly that. Is, as I mentioned, I was doing, talking head videos, and I still do those, but it to kind of get a bit more of a natural me on camera, and to be able to have great conversations, and to be able to kind of think, again, off the hip versus anything too formatted, and what I felt was kind of an enclosed, talk 30-second reel that I was trying to record. I enjoy this format a lot more. And it's something you can consistently create, and there's a bunch of benefits. So kind of walk us through this idea of kind of podcasting, and being a guest on someone's podcast as another form of video creation, and then what are the benefits of doing that when it comes to growing your personal brand, reach, additional content you can create for social, etc.
Podcast guest appearances is steroids for your personal brand, because you're getting exposed to an audience you didn't have to build. You can go and build an audience organically by yourself. That's going to take time, but you've got amazing podcasters like yourself, Dave, who spend hours mastering their craft every single week. They edit it, they produce it for you, then they distribute it to this audience that you haven't had to build. So for me, that is one of the best opportunities for personal brands. And there's tools like Podmatch, which is where we met, and you can find hosts and podcasts that are in your industry and in your niche. So they've already got access to the exact people that you want to share your message with. So you can show up, have a relaxed conversation, and then the host goes and does all the heavy lifting in the background. and then promote you and put you out to this large audience. So for me, as a personal brand, there's no better strategy. And then a lot of hosts too will share the assets with you. Go, here's the video file, here's parts that we've cut, and then you can get content generated for you from those efforts as well. So if there's been one thing that's really accelerated our agency this year, it has been podcast guest appearances. I have my own podcast, but I got to do all the work. I've got to build the audience. I've got to do everything involved. I've got to pay for the production and all the moving parts there. But when I get on someone else's show, it's a dream for me because I just get to talk to Dave and then I jump off and his team goes and does everything else. So
It's a lot of work too.
Yeah, I mean, and the upside is for Dave is I'll go push it across my network, so he gets to get new listeners into his show, he gets that reach and exposure. So there's not like there's nothing, and if it's a good conversation, it's quality for the listeners. So it does go two ways. But if you're a personal brand, the positioning and dynamics of being interviewed as a guest on a podcast is really powerful. People assume if you're being interviewed that you're an authority and you haven't had to convince anyone of that, and you get edified by the host. So I'd say if you're a personal brand, check out Podmatch and start getting on podcasts because that's really going to accelerate where your personal brand goes in the next 12 months.
Yeah, big shout out Podmatch. I just got onto that right after I started the podcast because quickly exhausted my immediate network of people that I was like, oh, I could throw them into a podcast interview, and found Podmatch, and it's been great. It's like a dating app for pod guests and hosts. Essentially, matches you up with people who you think would be a great host or you'd be a great guest on. So 100%. And on that point too, as I've been interviewing more and more people over the last few months, I'm trying to understand what a great guest would be able to contribute. What's the definition of a great guest? For me specifically, but in general. And one of the kind of concepts that I'm playing with is I know a conversation is going to be great when I can see that they already have an existing framework or really interesting story or unique perspective or unique method or a lot of hot takes on something. And the only way that I know that they have that is that they need to publicize that somewhere, right? A blog, social media, courses they have, what have you, YouTube videos. So that's just, for our listeners right now, one of the main benefits of, or one of the other, I should say, sub benefits of publicizing your strong opinions, your frameworks, showing up and not gatekeeping things, is that you need to show media opportunities that you have something of interest to say, because then they're going to want you on their platform to say it. That's how they get views, is because they're kind of like borrowing your fun tidbits and your your boilerplate remarks that they can spin into really engaging content. So show up and say it. Don't be afraid to say it, because it's actually going to open doors for you. But what's been your experience, I guess, so far in terms of you're not just a guest on podcasts, but you're also you host one. Where do you think people should start? I mean, we both know what it takes to run a podcast, and I would never advise someone day one to start a podcast. How would you advise someone who would want to start being a guest on someone's podcast, besides using Podmatch? What are some things they need to think about before going into starting to be a guest?
You need content out there, because the first thing the host is going to do, if they've got any level of established podcast, is go have a look. Is this someone that would be a good guest and can add value to your show? And if there's nothing they can find that ticks that box, they're simply not going to put you on. So build a profile and build a portfolio of content to get started. And what's helpful for myself is having the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system, because that can be the foundation of coming on and doing an episode as a guest. So what is it that you can talk about? What's that in elevator pitch, or that one sentence that you can contribute to a show? So coming up with your hook, something that would be really valuable to an audience and a host to put you on, but then having a feed on different platforms or your primary platform that actually showcases some of your expertise and you on video talking about it. And the great thing is, once you do get on a couple of episodes, you can add those links of those interviews to your profile. You can, if you're on Podmatch, you can add that to where the host can have a look at that and they can see your style, see how you deliver, and that can help you get a check mark to come onto a show that you might not have got a shot at if you didn't have those assets in place. So start creating content, because if you don't and you've got nothing to give certainty to the host, they're not going to put you on their show.
Mm. Yeah. And I mean, I haven't faced this yet because everyone that I've had on my shows has had a very good, we'll say, had good charisma and was comfortable in front of the camera and could hold a conversation. I do think that is important skills to have to help support a quality show, is, practicing those skills, being able to hold conversations, being able to answer questions and have good, being good at being able to really provide a thorough answer to a question. And not many people are, again, out of the box good with that. So I would say probably too, like, hone in on some of those skills. But because you can be, and you actually mentioned this as well. Some of you may have heard this before on other episodes, but I do this questionnaire that I send to all my guests, and one of the things I always ask is, what's a little tidbit about you that people wouldn't know? And you mentioned that you're actually introverted, and social media sometimes kind of rubs you the wrong way, or you kind of are, put off by it a little bit. And how have you been able? Because I can sense great charisma from you, and you're able to speak fluently on things, and you seem comfortable in front of the camera. What was that journey for you? Because usually introversion maybe sometimes means a little bit more quiet, less spoken, if you will. What was the journey for you to be an introvert but be able to be kind of natural on camera and be able to be a guest on a podcast and still show up in a way that's going to be engaging for people?
I remember Travis Jones, who's a fit pro business owner down here, used the term ambivert. So if you went into an event or a room, you'd mistakenly think that I'm extroverted because I can do those situations, but I love my own company. I love my own space. Nothing makes me happier than being on my own. And
So
I
that.
do get social anxiety in large crowds, but people naturally think that I'm extroverted because I can get on stage, I can do podcasting. So it's a very interesting dynamic. But with doing it, it's like going to the gym. You start lifting weights. If you keep doing it, you start to build a muscle and you get stronger, you get better. The content, speaking, it's exactly the same. Like you were saying earlier, when you first show up, it's terrible. And you go back to anyone that's built something now, look at their first videos, you'll see perfect examples of that. Mine's terrible. My content, I don't watch it because I know that I'll get in my head about it.
Mhm.
But for me, it's coming from a place of service. So it's not about me. It's for the other person. I want to add value and do it for them. And on the social media front, I actually don't like it. I think for so many reasons, it causes a lot of pain for a lot of people. Comparison. I think you get a lot of fake news, things that are untrue, that causes fear and scarcity. And I think if there wasn't a place for it in what I do professionally, then I probably wouldn't have it at all. It just happens that it's a little bit hypocritical given that our business is around content. But the way I look at it is we get to make the news feeds a better place. So we create content that adds value, makes people's lives better, as opposed to puts them in a place of fear or misleads them or makes them compare themselves to someone else and have expectations that are not a great fit for their happiness. So yeah, it's a bit paradoxical. But by getting on the field, doing the reps, I've become very comfortable talking, being on stage, being in rooms, being around other people. But I crave that solidarity. I crave being on my own, and I try to lap that up when I get the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, that's so funny. I definitely feel that 100%. And in fact, right before this podcast, there was a business networking expo at a club about a couple blocks from here. and I bought the ticket, and I had all these plans to like go and just mingle with everyone. And I went in. I actually went. I went in and I did like one lap, and I was like, all right, this is too much for me right now. I'm just gonna leave. And I just couldn't take it because it's just, too. Sometimes these big events can be a little bit overwhelming, too much stimulus at once. And I'm like, all right, I'll go back to my social connections here.
That's me
Uh,
too.
yeah, yeah. Well, Aaron, this has been awesome. I think in summation, the core thing that we learned today is that we need to get out of our heads a bit when it comes to thinking that we need the lights and the perfect camera and all this to get started. And really, we need to start with just the level 100 stuff. And we know where to find that, as you mentioned, is just go to Google and find what people already want to know and just talk on that, right? Don't overthink it. And then, pressing record is one of the most critical things, but also you want to press publish. The idea of how to present yourself on camera so you're being most authentic and comfortable so you can get that best content, and then how to spin that content into even more content, in fact 30 days worth, in just 90 minutes. So I think our audience has a good takeaway here to hopefully, if there's just one listener out there who hasn't created one piece of content right now. In fact, what would you say to that one listener that hasn't posted anything yet, but after this episode, what's the one call to action you give that listener?
Pull out your iPhone, hit record, and post something. Step
Yeah.
one, always the hardest. And that could be the post, just saying, this is something that I generally am terrified to do. And that's so vulnerable and it's so real and it's so authentic. And so many other people be watching that going, I'm so afraid to do that too. But I just listened to Dave and Aaron and they challenged me to do it. So here's me doing my first piece of content. I promise it's going to get a lot better when I start talking about some ideas about XYZ area of specialization. But this is step one. Thank you. Something like that. Off you go.
That point that you mentioned in there too is so underrated, because to have the vulnerability and honesty to say something like, I promise it'll get better. This is my day one. I'm going to work on it. Like, that's what people want to see anyway. Like, the overly polished stuff sometimes just doesn't land. But to be just like warts and all, like, hey, I'm here for you. I'm getting over a fear. I'm sure you all have the same fears anyway. Like, yada yada. That's what we want to see. So, like, give us that. Don't overthink it. But no, Aaron, this has been awesome. And so, if anyone was interested in the your 3-step system, wants all this content, and wants to learn more about your services, where can they go and how can they find you?
So we give the system away for free. So we've got a tutorial that shows you how to do exactly what we spoke about in the podcast episode. So the 30 days in 90 minutes content creation system. So you can download that at contentonly.au. And then you've got your two pathways. One is you go and do it yourself, which we're big advocates of. Number two is you're in the position where you go, hey, Aaron's team has the resources set up. That sounds easier. Then you have a chat to us about that. So it's absolutely free. Go get it. And I'll show you how to actually put into action what we just spoke about.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, Aaron. This has been awesome.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.